Hello, Manmeet. How are you? Thank you for taking the time to join me in this episode.
Thank you for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you very much. So maybe we can just start by introducing yourself and tell us about your PhD program, what you did in PhD program, and I'll be asking some other questions after that. So please.
So my name is Manmeet. I have a PhD in materials engineering from Thapar Institute of Engineering and Technology in India. During my PhD, we worked on understanding the optical and structural properties of rare earth doped calcium silicate phosphors. And we derived these materials using agriculture and food waste. So while researching the topic, we realized that there is a huge agriculture and food waste that we're generating globally. And disposal of that waste adds on to the operational costs. Dumping that waste into the landfills has environmental concerns. And transportation also adds to the operational costs. So obviously, there is interest in utilizing that waste and maybe doing something of high value to it. So when we
Mhm.
started looking deep, most of this agriculture and food waste is actually quite rich in silica and calcium. So that was where the idea came in for my PhD. So we started looking deeper into it. And what we wanted to do was we started exploring what agriculture and food waste we could take up. And we wanted to explore them for LED phosphor applications. So
Mhm.
phosphors are basically luminescent materials that are added onto an LED chip, right? So LED usually produces blue light, and along with that, phosphor absorbs that blue light and emits a yellow light. It's a combination of that system that is what we have in our white LEDs. Right. So for this particular research, the phosphor that we were exploring, so phosphor basically will have a host material to which we will add a luminescent material as a dopant. So the host material that we explored were calcium silicate
Mhm.
systems, right? Calcium silicate is a stable system, it's biocompatible, it's cheap, it's eco friendly, and it is quite stable for our working conditions, right? But then this was also used because the precursor that we are using, right, which was rich in calcium and silicon. So we thought that why not use, instead of using the chemicals that are widely available in the lab, take up the waste material and then synthesize this calcium silicate host using that material. So that is what the idea behind that work was, to take up the so-called waste and convert that into a high value added material. So once we started the project, it took us a while to actually, understand what was the composition of the material because it's a waste material, right? You cannot be exactly sure of this is the amount of silica you're getting, this is the amount of calcium. It will have some trace elements as well. So we took it up. We did some compositional studies. Then we tried to understand the effect of the thermal treatment on it, and then we narrowed down to the materials that we would be taking up in this project. So once that was done, then came actually the hardest part because the phase that we're trying to stabilize was tricky. So calcium silicates exhibit polymorphism. That is, they're very reactive to the synthesis conditions. So it took us a while to stabilize the phase that we were looking for. So did a lot of characterizations, XRD, FTIR, Raman, and it was a good learning curve. And once we were able to stabilize the phase, then we loaded on our dopants onto that. And we did good structural and optical studies subsequently. And in the end, we were able to conclude that yes, indeed, these agriculture and food waste can act as effective resource materials and could be applied for LED phosphor applications. So, my takeaway from that PhD project was that it gave me a deep understanding of material properties that I till date find very useful in whatever field or whatever project that I work on. Once I finished my PhD, I worked briefly an with a company in India as an editor in the material science wing. So, what my job responsibilities there were, we were getting manuscripts from non-native English speakers. So their research articles or review articles were being submitted to us from the clients. So the part of the job was either to do language correction, so as to ensure that grammatically it is up to the par of the journal. Then some clients also require us to perform a peer review before it gets submitted to the journal. So it was an interesting work that I did for a while. Then I came to Canada years ago, and that is when I started looking up what are the options do I have here. And then I came across this opportunity, a postdoc position that was being funded by McCain Foundation. So the project was at Dalhousie. I wrote the grant, we got accepted, and then I moved to Dalhousie University. So over here, to my understanding, postdoc is usually a research work only, right? But over the last 2 years, I've realized that it has more to do with responsibilities like project management. There is a lot of project management that we do as a postdoc. I'll just give a brief of the work that we're doing here. My project is basically in two directions that we're working on. The first one is we're working on developing luminescent solar concentrators. So all of this is also being done using agriculture and marine waste, right? So we're exploring those materials and trying to build advanced functional nanomaterials that will then be explored into luminescent solar concentrators. So just a brief introduction on LSC. LSC is basically a planar device, usually having a glass or a polymer structure to which a luminophore is loaded as a film, right? So the property is that these materials, once sunlight shines on that slab, they will absorb the light that will then be converted into most likely a higher wavelength emission. And because of the properties of the slab, it acts as a waveguide. So instead of letting all the light pass through, the light will get concentrated in the slab and gets concentrated towards the edges. So around the edges, we add silicon solar strips. So where is the application of this material? They are being explored as solar windows. Like in our urban areas, right? We have now high-rise buildings. And these buildings have a very high vertical area. So the research is now being shifted on how to use this area to harvest light. So these materials are fully transparent. And if added onto the vertical area of a building, they could actually harvest light and support the solar system panels that are attached on the roof. So that is one avenue that you're working on. We're also exploring these LSCs as a greenhouse cover, as a greenhouse rooftop cover. It is basically the application there is we want to modulate the sunlight according to the requirement of the crop that is being grown underneath. We actually did a pilot study at a local greenhouse, and we did get quite interesting results. And the McCain project that I'm working on, it's completely new. We're working on developing nanofertilizers for them. On that project, we're developing slow release fertilizers, right? Usually, the conventional fertilizers that we add, they have the problem of leaching. The plant is not able to take up all the nutrients, and many of those nutrients are removed. They remain in the soil and are then run off and enter the environment. That's a problem. So, if you're able to generate something that is a slow release fertilizer and that can match up to the nutrient uptake requirement of the crop, so we are able to improve the crop production, but reduce the amount of fertilizer that is being wasted into the soil and enters the water bodies. So it's a lot of applied work that we're doing here. So that is what I say. Like for my PhD, there was a lot of basic material properties that we studied. And that sort of helped me in understanding this completely new project. And this has exposed me to a more applied science research where we are able to see directly what are the impacts of the work that we're doing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for the comprehensive answer. That's awesome. So, actually, I'm kind of familiar with your research. Those like
Okay.
LED systems, and because I was a director of R&D in a company, so part of our work was based on that. But thank you very much for highlighting applications as well alongside the technical aspects. So, I'm more curious about your project management.
Mhm,
Skills because when we talk about project management in industry,
mhm,
uh, it can be kind of different than project management that we utilize in the project management skills that we utilize in academia, or at least
mhm.
in a like a postdoc setting, right?
Yeah.
So can you elaborate on the project management uh, things that you do in your current
Okay.
role in terms of how do you deal with stakeholders, for example, or if you deal with industry partners? Because
Mhm.
as you mentioned, you do the research part, but you have implemented part of the research in a farm, as you mentioned. So how do you deal with non-expert stakeholders, for example, or if there are
Okay.
somehow like conflicting priorities? For example, so your stakeholder, your customer, your client, your industry partner expects something,
Mhm.
but you need to match it what is truly feasible in terms of the technical part, in terms of the research part. And we can make some other examples of the project management skills that we use in academia. So please, so if you have anything in mind, so please let our audience know about those project management skills that you use.
Yes. So, project management as a postdoc, it is more to do with project coordination, I believe, because
Mhm.
your supervisor is the direct manager of the project, and there are technical people who are performing the experiments, right? But
That's
I
right.
am usually the point of contact, ensuring
Mhm.
that the timelines are being followed, they are up to date about the objectives. If
Mhm.
I talk very briefly, right? Before starting a project, we have to have a very clear project proposal that is written, right? That research proposal could be some document that is required to be submitted to a funding agency. Like in my case, I was being funded by McCain Foods, so I had to prepare a full research proposal for the funding. Then it could be a document that is to be submitted to the university for their approval for that project. So when I talk about research proposal, it is sort of like a charter that we prepare, right? It has to highlight what problem are we looking to solve. It has to then provide a background on why that problem is important for that funding agency. Why should they fund that? Then we are to propose what is our hypothesis, like what is the solution that we're proposing. And in that document, we are to present what experiments will we be doing to confirm that that solution, that actually is a solution for that problem, right? Along with that, when it comes to funding agencies, we have to provide in details what are the costs that we are looking at, what will be the timelines that we will be working on, how many people do we want to hire on the project. So all of this is defined beforehand. If we have any collaborators on the project, so before submitting anything to a funding agency, we have to get their approval on that document. So once that is done, we get the project, right? We have the funding. Like for example, one project that we're working on, it's a 5-year project. It's a government funded project. So there are multiple stakeholders involved. Like we have people in our university, we have people at another university, we have somebody for with which we are performing the trial in the field. So there are multiple people that are involved in that project. Sorry. So when we start the experiment, right? I am the person responsible because I know what we're trying to do here. So I will be responsible for training the student on the experiment. We have to ensure that all the people working on the project are on board with the objectives, with the timelines we're looking at. And of course, when we set on a timeline, we are obviously adding buffer to it, right? Because that is all research is about. Nothing goes as planned, right? It could go wrong. So we have the timeline, we have the buffer that let's say a week we are planning to do this, something might come up. So we have to keep those things in mind. So once the experiment starts, my main job is to ensure that things are going smoothly. In case any student is facing some trouble, I am their point of contact. As a technical person, I try to resolve whatever I can. Or if I am not, then I will bring somebody on board that is able to help them. Once we are able to get some data with us, then comes the analysis part. We have to analyze the data as we move forward. We cannot keep it to the end because many a times it can happen that the idea that you have in mind is not working. So you have to tweak your approach as you go forward, right? So that is an important aspect. Then, as you're working, you also have to loop in all the stakeholders that are there, right? So let's say we have a farm that we are working with. We are preparing a greenhouse roof for them, right? Now, the plants that they will seed, they will require 4 weeks till treatment. So we have to let them know that if they once started, if they have started the seeding, then we have to make sure that in 4 weeks we are ready with the roof cover. right? So a lot of coordination that we have to do. So we have to make sure the engineering team knows that they have 4 weeks, they have to get the stuff ready by that time. And when we're talking with the business owner, we have to first get them on board with the benefits that we are offering, right? As you said, like communication with a non-technical person, at least that's what my understanding has been. Like when we present our research, particularly like the agriculture work that we're doing, right? We could have like very interesting results of the fertilizer and the lab scale, right? It's a very interesting material, the properties are really good. But when you're talking to a business person, they will be more interested in what is the benefit that they are getting out of that, right? If our treatment is working for them, and if the money that they're putting in is worth the output that we're generating. So if you're generating like a 5% increase in productivity, it doesn't really matter much, because then the money that they'll spend on setting up everything for that particular treatment will not be worth it. So when you're talking to a non-technical person, you have to understand that what is the priority for them, and then talk in those terms so as to get them on board with the project.
Okay, thank you very much. Uh, you touched on many, many things actually. So part of it was the stakeholder management.
Mhm.
And how do you engage stakeholders in the project, basically? So you have a combination of technical, non-technical people in the university. So how do
Yes.
you make sure that they are on board all the time during the project timeline?
For the people that are working on the experimental part, that are physically present at the university, formally we have like weekly meetings that we set up to get an
Mhm.
idea of the progress that is going on, right? But because we are always there, so most of the times, if let's say we had planned something in the day and there is some issue that comes up, right? So we can always just get in touch with each other and then try to look up what went wrong or what can be done. But then for people who are at different research institutes, right, they would have other priorities as well. So with them, we have a more summary kind of a meeting that we do, right? That this is the work that we were doing, like with we had a partner at PEI, University of PEI, right? They were preparing a component of the fertilizer for us. So we used to have a meeting with them once the material was ready. Like initially, we will have a meeting with them, telling them that we need the stuff by this time. What are the properties of that thing that we need, and how much do we need? Then they will work on that component, and by the time we are ready to put it to action, or they are ready to send it over to us, they will let us know that this is what they've done, and this is the amount of sample that they can send us by this date. So it depends upon who you're dealing with, and whether it can be a one-on-one physical interaction, or if it has to be, let's say, an online virtual meeting once a month or twice a month, or it depends upon how much is the involvement of that stakeholder.
Mhm. That's awesome. Thank you. So do you happen to use any like project management tools like stakeholder engagement metrics based on their interest and impact? So some of them you you keep informed, some of them you engage, some of them you consult with. So do you happen to use any of those tools? Because
No.
it appears that you have pretty solid understanding of project management practices, but in
Yeah.
an academic setting, you may not
Yes.
necessarily need that. But not the
Exactly.
reason I'm mentioning that is that for this community that I created for PhDs, these are things that I want to highlight a lot
Yeah.
because sometimes PhDs are not aware of the skills that they have already and they're using them in academia, but those skills
Yes.
can be transferred to non-academic roles, right?
Hmm.
Things
Yeah.
that you are mentioning very, very clearly is that these are all project management skills. Maybe you can add some other skills to what you already know, and
Yeah.
it can become a career for you
Yes.
if you wanna join a company, for example, if you want to join industry or you wanna have a job in consulting, for example,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
it appears that you have very good foundation. If you want to maybe you can just extend on your skills and become even more professional. But it's really really amazing that you have these skills. So thank you very
Very
much.
much.
So I want to touch on your soft skills, basically. You kind
Mhm.
of mentioned a couple of these things. Stakeholder engagement management, these all require communication skills, as you mentioned. But what other soft skills do you use in your current career? For example, critical thinking being one
Mhm.
of the most important uh,
Yes.
soft skills, communication, you already mentioned, and problem solving, for example. This is another one. And the list goes on and on. So, what soft skills do you use in your current role that so far have benefited you?
Personally, that I feel is really important to excel today in any field actually is communication for sure, right? You could have the best results, but if you're not able to translate it into the form of a written document or in a presentation, it is not getting funded. It is not getting you published, right? So it will stay in the lab.
Mhm,
So I realized this pretty early in my PhD that that is one skill I would really like to have. And that has definitely helped me excel,
mhm,
right? Problem solving, critical thinking are the skill that every researcher needs, right? But there are cases like I have students in my lab. They would have done a lot of graduate students that have done a lot of work, spend weekends in the lab. They have the results. They did the failure. They did the troubleshooting. They have the results. But when it gets to putting it across on a table with people who might not be real experts in the field, that is where we often lack as researchers, right? We focus really deep into the technicalities, but not on the impact of the innovation, right? So that I feel communication, both written and verbal, is a priority right now, moving into any field out of academia. Then second skill that I feel really helps is multitasking. On a daily basis, as a postdoc, we're working on independent projects, we are mentoring students. You might be writing one paper, you might be preparing for a conference, you may be answering revisions of another one, you might be writing a technical report that is to be submitted to a funding agency, right? So there are different priorities that come up all the time. So an ability to multitask and be able to understand like what is a priority right now and how to best manage your time. I think that really helps a lot. And lastly, I think ability to adapt to changes
mhm,
because things keep changing. And that is one thing that as researchers, we feel that really causes stress is that, we expected the experiment to go a certain way and it did not. And then, we feel very personal with our research. We feel very protective of our research. So it is hard for us to, actually believe that, this is a problem. We need to find a solution to this. We need to change the process. So I think that is a skill that as a researcher helps a lot if you are a problem solver for sure. But if you're able to adapt to the change and try to find a solution accordingly. So that I think is very critical as well.
mhm. Thank you very much. That's important. So you pointed out something very important. So PhDs and technical people in general have that impression that, because the topic is so hot, let's say, in the research space, or it's very interesting. So it has applications in the real world as well.
Yeah.
But the reason is that, but the point is that most of the time it's not the case. So
Hmm.
as you may know, very little amount of research that is conducted in universities, finds its way into the market.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons is that scalability is the major
Yes.
issue with
Mm.
most of the research we do in academia, right? So because we do these things for learning, we do it for publications and things like that, but you accurately pointed out something very important, the impact of innovation,
Yeah.
which is what you said. Thank you very much. And I'm also very curious about your writing skills. So at the beginning, you mentioned your um, previous job as a technical editor.
Yeah.
I think you were referring to Cactus, I believe.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, because I'm familiar with that organization. And yeah, technical writing,
Hmm.
professional writing, things like that. So one thing that most uh, acad academic people are not aware of is that because they know how to write papers, they think
Mm-hmm.
that they have very good writing skills as well. But for example, writing has different forms. So technical writing, writing papers and stuff is something. But writing, for example, grants
Mm-hmm.
requires its own skills. It has its own nuances. Writing a patent, for example, for IP is
Mm-hmm.
something else. Business writing, right? So, or content writing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these forms of writing that they have their own nuances, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
would you like to elaborate on that part because you have had a lot of expertise in writing and testing and utilizing your writing skills in different spaces. So please.
Um, for researchers, we start from academic writing, which is when we write research papers. With research papers, we're focusing on the end result that we got, right? The best result that we have. We tend to not highlight all the failures that we had, what all optimization we did. And the paper is written from the perspective of a technical audience. So we tend to talk more about the whys of the result, like why did it happen? What was
Mhm,
the science behind it? What was the microscopic, nanoscale level phenomena that resulted in those results, right? So we're
mhm,
more focused on the whys of that. And the audience is also very technical. So the tone of a paper generally is more scientific. It can have a lot of technical um, wordings in it that might not be very easy for somebody who's not a very technical person from that field to understand. Personally, for me, I still think that one can write a research paper in a way that it is not too complex. You obviously have to keep the science behind it, but it can be written in a way so as to make some part of it understandable to a general audience. But still, it is always mostly focused on the end product. When we are writing a grant has sometimes there in terms of what you're going to do is just a one page document that you submit. All other pages are convincing the funding agency that you need to be the one selected for that grant, right? For example, as I previously mentioned, while writing a grant, we need to focus on the background of the problem. We need to highlight what is the problem. We need to in detail let them know that why is the problem important for their funding agency. Like every funding agency would have certain areas that they will be aiming to fund. So you need to align your grant according to your document according to the funding criteria of that agency. Then you have to clearly define what you plan to do and how you're going to test it. So the document then also has to present in detail what is the budget that they are looking for, what will be the timeline that you will be working on, and what how many people that you will need for that grant. Right? Even many of the grant, when you look at their requirements for the documentation, they will clearly mention that this document will be reviewed by an expert committee, but not necessarily a technical person who is specifically to that field, right? So the language on a grant document is expected to be more general, more plain, right? You need to put across that what will you do, how will you do it, why is it important, and make sure that is written in a way that is understandable by somebody who might not be the expert in that thing, right? If somebody doesn't get what you're trying to do, obviously your document will not be accepted for that thing. um, then comes to when we write technical reports. Once we are submitting something to a funding agency or any collaborator that we have, right? In those documents are usually prepared on a regular basis, right? Some funding agencies would require you to submit a report in 4 months, some require 6 months, some require a yearly report, right? So in those reports, we have to present more on what we did, what went wrong, what challenges were there, how we were able to overcome those challenges. So it has more data on what all you did. You have to be able to justify the amount of time. Like you cannot just say that, this is the product that I developed and it just works. But then that work seems like a month's job, right? If you took 6 months to get there, you have to justify the amount of time, the amount of manpower, the amount of money that went into getting to that result. So then in those reports, you have to focus more uh, on what all you did to try to get to that endpoint. So the objective in all of this is almost that we are talking about science, we're talking about the innovation that we did. But from what perspective it is written, that has to be kept in mind, for what audience it is written, how frequently we are reporting on that thing. So these are the parameters that I feel uh, help one understand like what to put in an academic paper, but might not fall into a technical report.
Mm.
It is the understanding of who we are writing it for, I think, makes it little easy to differentiate between what goes into that document.
That was perfect. Thank you very much. It was very comprehensive. I can totally agree with almost everything you said. Thank you. And what advice would you give to PhDs who want careers that combine research, writing, and coordination and impact? So, what would be your advice in general?
I think what I think is that start early. Like in
Mhm.
your PhD, you will do the lab work, you will do the literature review, you will write the paper. But then keep an eye out on other opportunities that you have within the lab, within the department. You, if you're really good at doing an experiment, but you might be an introvert in terms of um, you might be not that confident as a public speaker, right? So you might start voluntarily take up more opportunities where you can hone that skill, right?
Mhm.
As basic as a community day at a university, right? You can interact with students, general students, general audience out there, and you can present your research. Then you can shift it towards a poster presentation, oral presentation. There are many opportunities of developing your um, communication skills. Then, when it gets to writing, don't just focus on one style of research writing, because in PhD, we're generally writing our research and then it gets monotonous by the end of it, right? So, for me personally, I took up more opportunities. Like, I wrote 2 book chapters. So, when an opportunity came, I said yes to that, because writing for a book is also very different to writing even a review paper for a journal, right? So take up more opportunities like these. Then, if your supervisor is working on a grant, offer to help, right? That helps a lot, because you will see a template that is there that they usually follow, and then that will help you understand and improve on that thing eventually. So, my understanding and my recommendation is, I think, start to look beyond just the experimental work and try to make the best use, because the university environment also provides you a lot of opportunities to develop multiple skills. Like in my postdoc, I also took up a course recently on university teaching. It was a philosophical course, right? Nothing that I've ever studied before. But it's just I got to know something new. I think it will help me in my communication. It will help me in putting my point across the table, because although it is a teaching course, but teaching is also about communication only, right? You need to put your point across. You need to give the other person the time and space to understand what you're what you're saying. So
Mhm.
I think keep your eyes and ears open, take up as many opportunities, as many learning opportunities that you can. And I think all these, as you mentioned, are transferable skills that once you're done with your PhD, I've seen people that had PhD in a very specific niche, but then they're working in a completely different field. I recently spoke to somebody, they had their PhD in a medical field, but now they are working in consulting, right? It is nothing that they're doing that they were doing before. It is the transferable skills that they developed during their PhD that comes in handy when you're going outside of academia.
Thank you. And I am an example of that exactly. I myself.
Exactly.
So, and no, that's very important. So what you said uh, is very important because a lot of PhDs wait until they graduate and then they
Mhm.
start acquiring some of the skills that you mentioned. So that was, I think, a very important piece of advice for PhDs to start early. So thank you very much. So do you have anything else in mind that you want to talk about and I didn't ask?
I think you pretty much covered a lot in terms of what we can talk about in an academic setting, but about skills that can be transferable into a professional setting. Yeah. So yeah, I think we covered pretty much
So
all.
are you looking to join a company, for example, or you want to stay in academia? So
So yeah,
what's
actually,
your career goal basically moving forward?
yes,
So
I am almost nearing the end of my postdoc project.
mhm,
And so that's why I have been talking to people like me who have made the transition from PhD or a postdoc
mhm,
into beyond academia. Like personally, I am more interested into consulting. That
mhm,
is where I feel I could excel and use the skills that I've developed during my research careers
mhm,
and put and make use of that in in my career going forward. So one skill that I think that everybody talks about, like I've spoken to a few people, and then they all talk about this thing that we as researchers, we always talk about our research, right? We always highlight what we did in our PhD. This is what we worked on. But one common thing that I've seen in almost everybody is talk about your transferable skills, right? Highlight the skills that you've developed, like 5 year, 4 year PhD project or a 7 or 8 year plus postdoc. You have had the time to develop and work on a lot of skills, right? So one should be able to put themselves across as beyond an academic. So that
mhm,
is one thing that I've seen mostly common in all the people who've made the transition, that they were able to present themselves beyond just an academic. Like you are not just somebody who can do some very specific experiment that might not have the most application in the real world, but
mhm,
then you are somebody who has good communication skills, who has writing skills, who's taken up coordination roles, who's taken up multitasking. And so there are multiple skills that we acquire over our PhDs. It's just that we need to be able to sell it well. So yeah, right now I'm in the process. I'm looking out of actually actively for roles that will suit my skill set and that are beyond lab setting.
Okay, thank you very much. And I absolutely love your energy and presentation
Thank you.
skills. It's really
Thank you
good.
so much.
So this is something that you really need in addition to your technical skills and some other hard skills. Your energy, your excitement, and your desire to learn
Yes,
constantly and thrive, right? So and you definitely have that. Thank you. And with this community that we have created for PhDs, hopefully we can spread the word even more and engage in conversations like this so PhDs can understand that they don't have to wait until they graduate and
definitely. Yeah.
and to start acquiring these skills. So once again, thank you very much for joining me and
Thank you.
have a great day.
You too. Loved having the conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.